All right, good evening. My name is Whitney Carmen. I'm the Grayson County Ag Agent. And for those of you in attendance tonight, we are going to do a little presentation on understanding forage analysis reports. There are several that have been involved in my hay sampling program in the last couple of months. And several of you are, or you may be doing this on your own and you've gotten a forage result back and you call and you say, how do I understand this? How do I read it? And where does it apply to me? So we're going to talk through that this evening and hopefully get your answers, your questions answered. And if you do have questions, since this is a recorded video, you can contact me at the extension office Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30, or you can contact me via email at whitney.carmen@uky.edu. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and get started. And for those of you all that have a hay report, what are we looking for? And it's important to understand that interpreting forage analysis reports are actually a two-part process because you want to understand your basic terminology. So you got to know what the words mean on the actual report, and then also understand what the numbers mean. So we want to evaluate the forage's ability to produce the desired level of animal performance. So in this case, we're going to probably more or less be talking about winter feeding. A lot of our hay reports go into the fall and winter because that's why we produce hay anyway. So we're going to look at that. And is that feed good enough quality hay to, number one, minimize supplementation, get the animal to perform the way we want it to? And there's a lot of factors that go into that. So let's dig into it. All right, the first thing you want to do, obviously, after you've tested your hay, and for those of you that don't test your hay or are interested in testing your hay, that's a pretty simple process. We have hay probes at the office that you can check out, or you can purchase them yourself through various ag websites or through some different ag companies here locally. And what that's going to do is that probe attaches to the end of a drill, and you're going to want to drill in the side or the crossways into the hay. And in every way you sample that, you want it to be done in lots. And so if you've got a first cutting of fescue hay, that's going to be one lot. And then you've got a second cutting of fescue hay, that's going to be a separate sample. And so you want to make sure that your samples are done correctly. And we do have publications on that, as well as I can get you videos, or I can come out and teach you how to do that also. But for what that's worth, you want to have a good sample. And so when that result comes in, the other thing you want to do is visually inspect your hay. So where you're going to want to know when you send that sample in is what stage was it harvested. So was it early maturing hay? Was it late maturing hay? Was it moldy? Did it kind of, or if it's baleage, is it a little moldy when you cut into the bale to sample it? Were there many weeds in the field? So there's a lot of things a lot of factors that play into how good quality our hay is going to be. And then also, was it sweet or musty in odor? Because as you all know, a lot of us can tell good hay from bad hay, or hay that is questionable as far as feeding it. All right, so the report is back. Now what? What are we going to look at, and what's important to know when it comes to potentially supplementing our cows through the winter? And we've really been lucky in the last couple of years. We've had good quality hay. We've had a lot of hay produced in our county, and it's also great because we've not had really terrible winters. So we've probably going into this winter with a little bit of supply, and that's a good thing. So let's look back at those reports and see what they are, and know that the hay, if it's been stored correctly, that quality is not going to deteriorate too much as long as it's been stored correctly. So under storage or under a tarp, and those things. But so let's get back to the report itself. All right. One of the things you're going to look at is dry matter contact. When people contact me, they say, do I look at, there's going to be two columns on the report, and there's a dry matter, or there's an as received or as fed. And we are going to look at the dry matter content. That's what is where we get all of our nutrients from, and that's without water. And so that's the easiest way to calculate rations is dry matter. So that's what we're looking at. So that dry matter is the percentage of forage that's not water. So it's basically without water. Crude protein is going to be a sum of our true protein. That's another thing that we're going to look at. Protein is very important to the diet. And so that is one thing that we use to make sure that we have a supplement that's going to meet those requirements, and a forage that's going to meet those protein requirements. Relative feed value, or RFV, and this is on a lot of different reports. Every one that we use through Dairy One or Ward's Lab are going to have this value. And this is basically you're comparing another forage to each other. And so those numbers are based on 100, and which is the mean. And so if you're above 100, that means your forage is better than average. If you're under 100, it means you're not as good as average, but you still have good quality forage. The lower it goes, obviously the lesser quality. Now, that's not saying it's a bad forage. It's just a number, and it's just a relative scale. Total digestible nutrients is TDN that you're going to see on the page is the percentage of digestible material in our forage. That is essentially an energy number. Okay. That is where we are going to try and equalize our energy. And as you all know, in the winter, energy is probably more important than our protein in making sure that we meet our energy needs, because energy is expelled when they're walking to and from a muddy pasture to the hay ring, or if they're laying in mud and they've got it on their body, they're going to expel more energy. A few years back when we talked about feeding hay to cows and they were basically starving, they were full, but they were starving. It's because it did not have energy. Okay. All right. The next thing is nutrient detergent fiber, which is NDF. And this is another important number that we look at because it represents cell wall material in the forage. And while there's a lot of scientific numbers that go into that and how that's developed, it does help predict intake. That's what's important to us, is we can use that number to help predict intake. And we'll do an example of that here shortly. All right. So we do have to play the balancing act, because you have to, in order to feed your forages and to know what to put into your cattle, you got to understand supply versus requirement. And so what is the forage supplying us? Well, there's several things. Nutrient concentration. It's going to, the report's going to show us digestibility and also intake. Okay. What is required of the animal? Okay, so what are the requirements that the animal is going to need in order to survive and to thrive? And that's, we got to look and see their requirements are going to differentiate between lactation, reproduction, maintenance, and gain. Okay, so if you're feeding out heifers, bred heifers, what's their early bred heifers, what's the requirement versus a cow that's in early lactation? Well, her energy needs and her nutrient needs are going to be different, all right, versus even steers that are going to be gaining. So in this specific example that we're going to talk about today, we're going to look at our mid-gestation to early lactation cows. And that's going to be maintenance of those. All right, so what do we need to do to understand our forage needs? All right, first of all, we got to understand our nutrient supply. So what do we have? We got to understand what our cows are going to be intaking. So that's going to be how much basically can they eat during a day, and at what point and how much nutrients can we get in those cows in that estimated intake. We're also going to have to determine her nutrient requirements, and we're also going to have to determine if there's excess versus deficiency in that forage. And if there is deficiency, we need to develop a supplement or a ration. Okay. All right. So where is our nutrient supply when it comes into the cow? Well, there's a lot of tables out there and a lot of research that's been done, because nutrient supply is a function of all of these factors: intake, nutrient concentration, digestibility, and absorption. So how much is she going to eat? What's the content of the food, and how well is she digesting it? Is she going to digest mature grass hay better than she's going to digest fresh cut alfalfa? There's variation in that and how her rumen is going to digest that. And then how is she going to absorb that? And so our forage test is going to tell us a lot about that. It's going to tell us that nutrient concentration. And so we can develop it from there. And this table over on the right, and I showed this because this talks about the differences in their intake versus their lactation, especially for the cow. All right, so if they're in late gestation, they're really only going to be taking about between 0.5% and 2% of their body weight, which is about average. If you think about it, we kind of, a lot of our supplements and a lot of our rations, we base it on around 2% body weight. And then early lactation, as you can tell, she's going to go way up to almost 2.5% of her body weight. That's because she's producing for 2. She's needing a lot of energy and a lot of protein to get that calf up and going. And especially the first 30 to 60 days, that's the most important time frame for that cow. You're going to need to look at body condition score during this time too, because as much as we can make a supplement, as much as we can feed them, one of the best indicators is looking at our body condition score as well. All right. And then late lactation, it kind of drops off back to that 2% a little bit. All right. All right. So once again, we looked at that intake. And so how can you estimate it? Well, we look at that number on the hay sample result of NDF. Okay. And it's used to reflect the potential intake of that forage. So let's think about this for a second. As fiber content increases, okay, so NDF increases, the digestibility, energy content, and forage intake decreases. Okay. So I'm going back to that example of our late cut, mature fescue hay is going to be harder to digest than our lush alfalfa or fresh cut clover or our mixed grass hay that's been cut at the right time. So therefore our fiber, our NDF is going to be pretty high for that late maturing hay. Okay. But that doesn't mean that she's going to be able to digest a whole lot of it. So for example, if we're going to try to figure out how much she's going to eat during a day, and this is once again on a dry matter basis, because this is the best way to calculate that. DMI, which is our dry matter intake percent of body weight, equals 120 divided by the NDF. Okay. I don't know where that number came from. I don't, so I'm not exactly sure. I'm sure there's some reason why it's 120, but I do know that that's the calculation that we look at. So 120 divided by the NDF number. So for example, if our NDF on a hay forage result is 53, we're going to take 120 divided by 53, and that's going to equal 2.26%. Okay. So then we're going to take 13. So, and as you know, our cows are not getting smaller. So we're going to look at around a 1,300 pound cow. Okay. And we're going to multiply that by 2.26 divided by 100, or that percentage. And that's going to equal about 29.4 pounds of dry matter intake a day. Okay. So that's on dry matter. She's actually probably, if you think about the actual feed that you're feeding her on an as fed basis, she's going to actually eat more than that. Okay. And so, but on a dry matter basis, it's 29.4 pounds of dry matter intake. All right. So that's quite a bit of feed. But she's going to eat, I mean, she'll eat that about in a day's time. Now, like I said, this is for mid-gestation cows. Okay. So you do have to understand that we know this, that you have to account for factors like mud and mold and nutrient deficiencies, because those are all factors that are going to determine, those are external factors or environmental factors that we need to take into consideration. So if we know a big snowstorm's getting ready to come in, or if we know that it's going to be dropping below 0 degrees for a few days, we know that we're probably going to have to increase that intake just a little bit. All right, so now let's look at the nutrient requirements of those cows. And it's important to know, just a little backstory on it, that our rations that are utilized in the tables that we use to develop these supplements and these rations are developed from the nutrient requirements of beef cattle. So it's a big book that NASEM and the NRC, the National or the Nutrient Requirement Council, they are they develop these tools. And so it's important to understand and know the stage of production and what energy requirements are going to be needed at each stage of that. You can find these tables online. I have copies of the beef or the NRC book here. And I will say, though, a caveat to that is it does not account for our breed differences in certain aspects. So, for example, our lactation between breeds. Our Gelbvieh-based animals are going to lactate a little differently than our Angus breed is, and versus our Herefords and those types of breeds. So there are some differences that are not accounted for. So you need to understand, and you can look through for those and kind of get an understanding of whether you're going to need a little bit more than that or less. So for example, let's look at this production stage. So for a dry cow in the second semester, or in her second trimester, excuse me, she's going to need about 61%, or actually she's only going to need about 50% TDN. So that's our energy. And she's only going to need about 7% crude protein. Whereas a third trimester, they're going to need about 55 and about 8. And then for a second-year-old, average milk, mature, heavy in lactation, okay, she's going to need about 60 to 65% TDN because she's needing more energy. She needs to use more energy. And then she's going to need about 12% protein. Okay, so our energy requirements are going to go up based on what they're producing. All right. For example, if you're looking at feeding out steers, then you're looking at, this is on maintenance, or this is not energy for maintenance, it's energy for gain. And they're going to need about 61% TDN and about 19% crude protein. So more protein and pretty good TDN. So we're pretty good energy. All right. Lots of numbers on here. But this was taken straight from the NRC of beef cows. And so the reason I'm showing you this is because I want to show you that if you're looking at this red circle here, this red line across, if you're looking at 1,300 pound cow, and she's expected to have about an 80 pound calf, her dry matter intake is going to be about 22 pounds a day. Okay. And she is eating about 1.7% of her body weight. And that is just during middle third of gestation. Okay. So where are we going to look at? So we want to look at her numbers for TDN and energy, and that's going to be 50 and 7.1. And then if you'll look at the last third, it goes up. So she's going to be eating about 25 pounds a day, and she's going to need about 55 pounds of energy or percent energy and about 8 crude protein. And then at the very bottom of the page, she's going to need around, for early milking, okay, and this has got it broken down into peak milk days. TDN is around 60 and our crude protein is around 11. I know that's hard to see, but we want to look at those two things because those are, when we develop our ration here soon, those are the two main things that I want you to look at. And I'm going to caveat this by saying this is a general rule of thumb. This is something that I was looking at, and I apologize for all the jumble at the bottom, but this is what I tell folks. If they need something quick, if they're looking at a ration and they're needing something quick, just to be able to base a quick supplement off of, we are going to look at our mid-gestation cows are going to need about 7, late is 9, and early is 11, or early lactation is 11. So 7, 9, 11. And then our total digestible nutrients are going to be 50, 55, and 60 on the TDN. Okay. And so those are the numbers I tell people to kind of keep in their head. And that gives us a good base to go with. Now, like I said, this is not assuming our harsh external factors. And you don't want to, so we're going to use this for supplementing, and this is not an indicator of intake. So you do need to understand your intake and know if you're going to need a little more or a little less, determining or based on those external factors. Okay. All right. Quick thing on our forages. So where would your forage lie? So another thing is all right, so I've got some legume hay, all right, or some mixed legume hay. What's our average dry matter? And that's around 90. Our average ADF is going to be around 35, which that's that's not necessarily something we have to have, but on our dry matter basis, our NDF is about 48. I'm sorry, I keep going back, guys. And then our crude protein is about 17 to 21%. Go down here and look at our corn silage. All right, just for reference. Okay, look down here at corn silage. Our average dry matter is about 33%. So we've got a little more moisture in our hay, which is fine. Our average NDF is 42.7 and our crude protein is only 8.4. Okay, which is not bad. It's actually pretty good. It's going to cover a mid-gestation cow. However, we need to look at our energy requirements on that. Silage is going to have pretty good energy requirements because it's corn. It's going to have energy. So looking and knowing what our forages produce is also a good way to help determine what we're going to have for our supplement. All right. Also, our examples of dry matter, which, like I said, this is just something for you to use. It's not necessarily an end all be all, but understanding that obviously your dry hay stored inside is going to be your most dry on the dry matter. And then your silage and in uprights and in bags are going to lower in dry matter. Okay. It makes a little sense if you're doing any of these things. Okay. Okay, so we've gone through all the numbers. We've discussed some of the things that we need to understand. What are we going to look at now? So I've got a alfalfa first cutting. So if you look at the very top, this is an example of a forage result that came in earlier this summer. Well, not early summer, it was in August, but I want you to look and say we're going to be feeding a 1,300 pound cow. Okay. And in general, you want to feed your good hay, your best quality hay to your lactating cows or your cows that need the most energy. Okay. And so what I tell folks is if you've got a spring calving herd, all right, which is typical for this area, if you've got a spring calving herd, you're going to want to feed your lower quality hay before Christmas or in the early part of the winter. Okay. Hopefully we've had a great year to stockpile. So if you've got stockpile, that's even better. But use your lower quality hay first, feed your good quality hay to your cows that are lactating, and then you can supplement from there. So that's going to lessen your cost overall. And then also, if you do have that stockpile in there, utilize it to the best of your advantage. Use that because that is better quality than any kind of hay we can get. Okay. All right, so let's look at this hay result. So we're looking on our dry matter basis. So we're in the second column. And if you'll look over here, we've got crude protein at 18.4. So that's expected for alfalfa. Alfalfa's got a high quality protein. It is a protein forage. And so therefore you are, that's a good protein indication there. We look at our NDF, which is 56. Okay. And then we also look at our TDN, which is 47.6. Okay. So a lot of our higher protein based forages are not going to be as high in TDN. Okay. So we're going to be, would need to supplement some sort of energy source if we are heavy lactating. So it's going to need about 60% TDN. So we're going to probably need to have some sort of energy supplement in that situation. And our relative feed value is 86. And the reason why it's 86 is because of that TDN. That does not mean it's a bad quality forage. It just means that you are probably going to have to utilize some sort of, it indicates that there's maybe going to be a need there. All right. All of these other numbers on here, if you'll look, since it is a dry forage, dry matter percent is going to be 100% on the dry matter basis. All right. It's got 88.9% dry matter as received. And so it's about 88.9%. And that's, like I said, you can utilize that to develop your intake. So now we want to develop a supplement, knowing that those numbers, and we're going to take that hay sample and we're going to go over and use the forage supplement tool here in just a second on that. we're going to develop a supplement. And once again, our goal for supplementation is to meet nutritional requirements to achieve milk production. In this case, get cows and calves through the winter and without lowering their BCS too terribly bad. Making sure it's cost effective, because here's the thing on that. If you have resources available to you, if you've already got silage on hand, if you've already got stillage that you get, if you're close to the feed, utilize your local feed store and see what commodities are available to you at a cheap rate. And not saying to skimp out, because at the end of the day, we need fed cows, and we need cows that are fed cows that are doing good jobs with milking are going to make you money. Okay. So we don't want to skip out on the supplement, but what is going to work for you? All right. And so we're looking at it on a least cost basis, but we also are making sure our energy and our nutrient requirements are met. All right. So I'm going to click on this, maybe. All right. And let me share my screen to where we are going to be on the Forage supplement tool. Okay. All right. So on here, we are going to, let me make sure I've got that here. Okay. All right. So we are going to plug this, use this beef cow forage supplement tool. And we are going to plug in our forage analysis, and we are going to, if you look down on there, there's corn, soy hull, 75%, and there's different types of feeds that are average for our area. And so what we're going to do is we're going to plug in the dry matter content of the of that feed, and that's going to be, it was 88% dry matter. Okay. Our crude protein on there was 18%. Our NDF was 47. Okay. And our TDN, I'm sorry, our NDF was 56 and our TDN was 47. Okay. And for a early lactation, so stage of production, and I'm going to say I've got some corn on hand and I've got some corn gluten feed. Okay. And I'm going to, and maybe even some distillers dry grains. Let's just see what this says we can utilize. It's going to throw in here a calculation result of for lactating, and this is assuming a 1,250 pound cow. Okay. So, we're looking at 1,300, but 50 pounds, give or take. So, you may have to feed her just a little bit more. We're looking at this, and it also throws in here a 6 pounds max for corn, because after you get about 6 pounds of corn, it starts messing with the digestibility of the cow. And so we try to keep it less than 6 pounds. And so look here. You can do 5 pounds of corn with this forage, and you can do 5 pounds of corn gluten feed, or you can do 5 pounds of dry distillers grains. So that's not saying you have to use all 3 of them, but this is what you can use. And so if I were you and you had dry distillers grains, that's looking like that's going to be your best bet. All right. In an as cost or least cost situation. All right. So that's going to basically tell you this is what you're going to need to supplement to meet the energy and the protein requirements for this cow. Okay. So this is a really quick tool that we use. You can also, there are a lot of real, big calculations that you can use to do it on or there's also some feed calculators. We also have a beef ration tool that we can use. So I utilize that and then work with a specialist to make sure that it's accurate, because it is a very, it's got a lot of intensive properties in it. But this is your basic, easy for you to use. You can get online and find it. And all you got to do is Google Forage supplement tool and it will pop right up. Okay. So pretty easy. We can go back here real quick and say if we were doing late gestation, and we can go in here you would only need about a half a pound. And I'll be honest, if it's a half a pound, I'm always going to tell you to watch body condition score. Okay. We don't want 2s and 3s. We want to keep them in that 3 to 4 range, especially during lactation. We don't want them to get down any less than that. Okay, so you can use that. If there's something that's on this supplement that you do not have, we have that nutrient library for a lot of different feeds. And so we can find that for you and we can plug in and do a calculation for you if we have to. So this is not, like I said, if it's not on here and you don't have it, we can find access for you and we can make that supplement ration for you. All right, so I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint here. All right, and we'll finish it up here. All right, so in summary, our goal is to use good quality forage and limit supplement while maintaining nutrition requirements of our beef cow herd. We understand that, we understand that feed costs are high. We understand that it takes a lot of time and money to develop a high quality forage. But there's there's several things that can go a long way in doing that. And if you've got, like I said, a spring calving herd, supplementing is probably your best bet. But understanding what quality forages you have will help you save money in the long run. Because if you don't know what you have, you can look at a table all day long and give an average, but maybe you have better quality hay than you think. It also, you may not have as good a quality hay, but that's something that you can know and go from there and develop strategies to help increase your forage quality. And at the end of the day, the eye of the master fattens the beast. And that is attributing that back to body condition score. If you're not watching your cows and their body condition score, that's the quickest way to tell if they are meeting their needs or not. Also, it is important to understand maintaining it and having a supplement that is easy, or having a supplement that meets all the requirements is allowing you to not feed your cows, but basically starve them to death. Okay. So having those all met, those nutrient requirements met will allow you to wean good calves. So, with that being said, we do have some resources out there. The UK Forage website is a great tool. It also has on that website a link to pretty much every forage program that we have done virtually in the last couple of years. And so there is a wealth of knowledge out there. It's a little bit overwhelming, honestly. And so if you've got something specific that you're looking for, reach out to that YouTube website, contact me. I can help you find that. And then also utilize that beef cow supplement tool. And as always, I'm available at your convenience and here at the office, and we can work out something for you as far as a ration or a supplement if you've got further questions. If you do want to get your hay sample tested or your hay tested, we still are doing that. You're more than welcome. We have several probes you can check out here at the office, and we will get you information on how to do that. And then you can turn them into us, and we send them to the lab at Ward Lab, which is a good lab for us to use, and it's $11 a sample. And so it's a really good $11 investment, if you ask me. With that being said, I don't have any other slides here, but if you do have questions, please, reach out to me. I hope that you enjoyed this presentation. And if we do have publications there at the meeting, and we will hand those out to you. All right. Thanks, guys.